The Florida Panthers are continuing to pick up the intensity during training camp. We discussed line combos and Paul Maurice emphasizing the need to reinvest in the system.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, September 22nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Cats fans, as we spoke about after our part 1 and 2 of discussing Media Day, this was good. Friday's episode was always going to be a late recording, but instead of having one practice worth to discuss, we have two now because we are recording this at 4:11 p.m. on a Friday, and it is Friday, which means it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Nick Fairbanks is back, and Nick, not only welcome to the show, but tell everybody where you are coming to us from.
I am coming from Cinque Terre, Italy, right now. So it is around 10 p.m. So thank you for pushing this to be as late. And also, I never got to say this, but congratulations on the Hockey News gigs. Proud of you, man.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very excited for the opportunity once again. Tomorrow, sometime in the morning, I will be my Oliver Ekman-Larsson story will be coming out on how this can be a great opportunity for OEL with being with the Florida Panthers. But let's discuss the first 2 days of training camp for the Cats. Just a few notes on who was there, who was not there. Day one, no Ryan Lomberg for the Florida Panthers due to the birth of his daughter, Lennon Lomberg. Ryan Lomberg was later in day 2 of training camp as well, part of Group B for the Panthers. Carter Verhaeghe left a little bit early as part of Group B as well. Paul Maurice did discuss that it is a little bit of tightness, nothing too precautionary, nothing to worry about. Excuse me, just precautionary and all, and it was not seen on the ice for day 2. And Montour, Ekblad are working in between the sessions on their own, some of it with Patrick Hornquist and some of it mostly skating. Josh Davies was not there in the first practice, but was back there for the second practice. And no Liam Arnsby for either sessions for the Panthers. So those are and also another player of note, Yona Jakovic was working with Montour and Ekblad during in between sessions. But Nick, let's start with Carter Verhaeghe. And this is something that Kobe Guy and Alex Baumgartner spoke about really on their Fifth Line 5-hour show yesterday, and talk about it's not something that to push too hard for Carter Verhaeghe as far as being back in the lineup to start the training camp. We know he's a 40 goal scorer. We know that what he can bring to the table, and I'm not too worried about him being part of the lineup to start the season. Mo spoke about things just tightening up and maybe a little bit of stretching, maybe a little bit of hydration. Also, Maurice said whoever's healthy will play. So in the doubleheader to start. So a little bit of insight on what we might see on Monday in the doubleheader. But let's start with Carter Verhaeghe. Your level of concern, is it high, low, or right in the middle?
Low, just because I know he had an eventful summer, and he's just coming back. So I hope, or I would rather have him go through these minor tweaks in training camp now rather than in games that matter. because I know Florida's going to need him this season, especially with the start that they're going to need in order to put themselves in a good position to make the playoffs this year. So I'm glad that they're just taking the precautions. But, at the end of the day, we know what we have with them. And, can't wait to see a few more game-winning goals from him this season, hopefully in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, we're going to see quite a few of them. No doubt about it. And funny enough, NHL, I believe it was NHL Network who put a stat on the most goals by a winger since 2009, 2010. And if you were to start that from 2019 and end that probably in 2029, just predicting the future, I think you're going to see Carter Verhaeghe up there as far as the top five, as far as goals via wrist shots. So we're looking forward to seeing Carter Verhaeghe back, and if he's not back in the next few days, nothing to worry about. But one thing that was discussed mostly leading up to training camp was the intensity for what Paul Maurice was going to bring in the first few days, and board battles, one-on-ones a lot as well, and also when it comes to a one-on-one entering the zone as far as forward versus defenseman, of breaking up passes, lanes, using your stick as well. And one of the notable ones was Nico Mikkola. Really, the only battle that he really lost really was against Matthew Tkachuk, and that's not a knock on Nico Mikkola by any sort. And he was one of the few signings who did get term outside of him and Evan Rodriguez. Just signs of encouragement, knowing that this is a guy that was brought in during his media availability yesterday. He spoke about a guy who a lot of people don't play against. Who don't like to play against, someone who was called annoying, but he takes it as a compliment as well. So definitely a good sign for a new signing, even though it's not really something to overreact based on 2 days of camp.
No, but you have to think he's probably going to be the Gudis replacement on the back six. So to say that he's annoying to play against or he's hard to play against, it's something that Florida desperately needed to address and acquire. So I'm glad Bill Zito went out and made the move that he did. And it's kind of reassuring that Matthew Tkachuk was the only one that was able to beat him during board battles, because who's Matthew not beating these days, really? So that's the way I try to look at it. But it's going to be interesting to see when it comes to, game form, how he's going to be able to react, and, if he's going to have that physical presence that Florida needs, because they needed it during the Stanley Cup Finals, and it just didn't look like they had that part of the game, against Vegas. So looking forward to seeing what he can do. And hopefully Matty Tkachuk is 100% healthy now. It seems like he is, but you never know when, something like a sternum gets broken and everything. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and Nico Mikkola, one thing that was also discussed during him and Eetu Luostarinen's media availability was the fact that they know each other. They played together before. Eetu Luostarinen was talking about how they played in an alumni game with Anton Lundell as well. So the guys started getting to know each other. He spoke about how Nico Mikkola is a guy who has a great stick. Nico Mikkola talking about the hard pace that Paul Maurice brought, that he likes the intensity, likes to use his long reach, especially when skating backwards in transition as well. So those guys, maybe a little bit of something there as far as a relationship, creating something better on the ice as well for the Panthers. One other player that got to speak to the media yesterday was Sam Bennett. Spoke about how, once again, he doesn't mind the intensity when it comes to the first few days. That he wants it to be hard. He want, and how Paul Maurice wants the group to be prepared. Spoke about how it was the most fun that he's had playing hockey in his life. And also, one thing that spoiler alert, including in my Oliver Ekman-Larsson article, is the fact that Sam Bennett also played against OEL quite a few times while Bennett was in Calgary. OEL was in Arizona as well, and talk about what he brings to the table as far as a guy who brings composure as well, who knows how to lead a charge for a team, and someone who's a pretty steady presence there as well. And and also the shortened off season is that the fact that last two teams standing and you're coming in and all the offseason work, you're not losing your touch as well. So I think that's also a great benefit for, despite no rest for the Panthers, they're getting back in the groove, and like Bennett said, not losing that touch.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the fact that, Paul Maurice, is having the intensity ratcheted up. And I know that was one of the common themes in his first training camp last year where, he was just skating the boys and he was doing a lot of one-on-one board battles, just getting them ready. And look what it did for the team, after they completely bought in. They're winning every board battle. They were making sure that the puck was getting cleared out of the D zone. They all trusted in each other and they really bought into the system. And one of the players that really benefited from that was Sam Bennett, especially when he came back from injury into the Boston series. He kind of just gave life to the Panthers, and in that game 5, when he came back. And then also, in that Toronto series where he was a wrecking machine everywhere he went. And then I forget who he knocked out in game 4 against Carolina, but Jacob Slavin. So it just shows that I think, Bennett's ready to go. I think he has possibly another little another gear to go. I honestly think, and if he's having fun right now, I can only imagine what it's going to be like either opening night or during the season.
Yeah, and one thing we're hoping is definitely a healthy Sam Bennett come this season, as well as the center depth is going to be really key for the Panthers. So we're going to transition over to segment number 2. We're going to discuss some of the line combos that we've seen as well through the first few days of training camp, and whether it's something to be hopeful, overreact, or you name it. We're going to discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Birddogs. And Birddogs make you look good. Birddog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Birddog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made Birddogs fixed this issue by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Birddogs uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Birddogs are functional for any occasion, whether it's going golfing, going on a date, an evening out, going to the pool, working out, lounging, or at work. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or enter promo code LockedOnNHL at checkout for a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. Segment number 2 here on this Friday, September 22nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. So, Nick, it's only been a few days since we've heard the announcement of some of the front office changes for the Panthers, and right out of the gate is Patrick Hornquist working with the guys on the ice, and also Ryan Lomberg had something to say about Patrick Hornquist. Actually, I have a screenshot right here of what Ryan Lomberg said about Patrick Hornquist working. It says, quote, "He's only got one speed. It's 110% every second, no matter the month, no matter how many guys are out there. It's always the same. He's a champion ×2, close quote. And despite not having the opportunity to suit up anymore, Paul Maurice also spoke about how he wanted to get him out there just for the sake, not just for the sake, but one of the sakes is chirping the guys, getting them under their skin. And it kind of gives me, as far as comparing like maybe basketball, as far as Udonis Haslem vibes for the Miami Heat, a guy who was there for so many years, even though Hornquist was playing with the Panthers for 3, but kind of living that role as player coach, even though he's not a player anymore. and just the fact that is just so fresh for Hornquist to be with the guys, I see nothing but benefit for this Panthers team on what Hornquist is bringing to the front office.
Can't say that I'm happier for somebody, as such as Patrick Hornquist, just because the way his career ended. I'm glad Florida was able to bring him back in and retain him, because I think not only in the locker room, but, if they're going to put him on the bench or even up in, the seats, he's going to be an attribute to this team. I've talked about it multiple times during the playoff run, but you always saw him in the tunnel celebrating with the team, being emotional, and you could just tell that he wanted to be there and he lives for this. And I don't think Florida's really had that many players come back and be able to do that. I mean, yeah, we have Brian McCabe that's, with the team. You got Luongo that's in the front office. I know Brian Screwlin was there. Billy's still with the team. He's doing radio and stuff like that. So it's very awesome to see that they can just transition Patrick from a player support role to an actual support role with the organization. And I'm just, between you and me, I'm actually glad that he's an actual on-ice coach rather than going over to Sweden and scouting right now, because I think his skills probably play better in that role. And, maybe down the line, he may be a scout. But I think for right now, where Florida is and what they're trying to accomplish, this is the guy you want either on the bench or coaching your guys up.
Yeah, and maybe he does eventually transition, like you said. But let's go on to line combinations on some of the consistent ones that we've seen. We saw a little bit of Mackie Samoskevich with the top line of pairing him with Barkov, and then we saw a little bit of Denisenko as far as day one of training camp. But day two, we saw a line that was a little bit expected with Evan Rodriguez playing on Barkov's wing. Of course, we spoke all summer about his experience working with Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon. But another one, don't know how much stock to put into this, is Grigor Denisenko on that top line with Alexander Barkov and Evan Rodriguez. And it's also dependent on what's going to happen with the third line as well, with if Sam Reinhart is going to be on that third line or if he's going to be on that top wing as well, because we saw Mackie Samoskevich playing with Lundell and Etu Lutheran, and maybe it's the Florida Panthers version of the kid line as well. And then we saw Cousins, Bennett, and Tkachuk together, but something that we saw a lot throughout the playoffs. But with Carter Verhaeghe out, we don't know none of these are final, by the way. So that's really what we got so far as well. But once again, going back to Kobe Guy and Alex Baumgartner, what they spoke about on their show is that Mackie Samoskevich could have probably an incredible camp and still not make the team, based on all the other guys around the Panthers who you don't want to lose to waivers for the team. An example is Lucas Carlson is a player that you don't want to lose as well. And let's go to deep defense. OEL and Forsling, something we expected. Mike Riley and Uvis Balinskis as well, and then Dmitry Kulikov. Later on in his career, wasn't expecting for him to get a top role with Josh Mahura. Josh Mahura needs a friend again with Radko Gudas out to Anaheim now, and all. So, and also Paul Maurice said that they won't work on power play this week, but Oliver Ekman-Larsson is going to get a shot once they start practicing the power play. Your thoughts on the lines so far, my friend?
Well, it's the second day of practice, so I think the lines are going to be, thrown in a blender per se, but I think you also have to go with what you know and what worked. So I'm not really worried about the forward lines right now. I'm just glad that Cousins is staying up on the second line, because for what he did in the playoffs with Tkachuk and Bennett, he helped stir that drink. He was able to create turnovers or, win board battles and get the puck to them. So happy to see that he's still up there. But then when it comes to like Lundell, Reinhart, Losterrain, and maybe even Evan Rodriguez, Panthers are in a good position to have a lot of players and, try to fill out the top 6 or the top 9. And this is something they had trouble with last year. I mean, one of the topics we had is that the depth isn't there, and this year they kind of do. But, with things that are, good and you're kind of gluttonous on it, you always have a negative or a possible opportunity. And, that comes to Carlson possibly, being subjected to waivers. Hopefully not, because he deserves a shot with the Panthers. If that means Simon Skavich has to go down and, mature a little bit in the AHL, it's not a bad thing. It really isn't. And if Florida decides, that they're struggling with goal scoring, they can always bring them up and drop them back down.
And injuries will be, it's not if, but when people get hurt as well. So, when it comes to bringing guys up, and I think I'm very confident that Mackey will be in the show sometime this season. It's just about when, really. And Doug Plagan spoke about this last season after the 23-man roster was announced. The 23 that you start isn't the 23 that you're gonna end with. You're gonna need help along the way, all throughout the organization and all. And one thing that you mentioned based on the complementary role players as well, I want to go back to Evan Rodriguez and what Paul Maurice said on Thursdays, on day 1 of training camp on Thursdays. Like one benefit that Evan Rodriguez has is that you could put him at either of the wings and at center for Evan, and I think that's really like a luxury for the Panthers as well. I mean, you have the luxury of Eetu Luostarinen at times when you need Anton Lundell to go up to the wing on the top line as well, and Denisenko too. And Denisenko, not necessarily a guy who's interchangeable, but getting an opportunity to work with an elite player like Barkov and learn under him. Yeah, he doesn't have a career goal yet, but starting to work a little bit under him can get his game going, because he's on a one-way deal. It is a big emphasis. They sent a message that this is your time to make an impact on this roster.
Most definitely. And, who better to learn from than Barkov right now? It seems like whoever he plays with is put in the best position possible. I partially want to say that Carter Verhaeghe's success has been because of Barkov, but Carter does his own thing. And, he's been successful because he's put himself into great positions. But, Denisenko, I hope and pray that he has an amazing season, because as you said, this is, basically, you're either going to do it or you're not. We're going to move on, and it could be very quick. If he shows that he hasn't grown or that he cannot buy into the team system, Florida might have to move on, to be honest with you. They have too many other parts that are moving. They have guys that are going to be coming back from injury and other guys that can probably fill those spots on the team that could contribute. Now, to get back to your whole defensive point that you were making, I'm glad that Oliver Ekman-Larsson's getting the first shot at the power play quarterback. It'll be very interesting to see how he decides to run it. I hope he runs it like Brian Campbell did, where he basically was the main guy dishing the puck. But we know that Barkov and Tkachuk are down there, so I don't think that's going to happen a lot. But just be able to contain and maintain the puck, that's all I ask for. And if he does that, I think he'll be pretty effective.
No doubt, and definitely an opportunity, as there's been a lot of uncertainty where Oliver Ekman-Larsson has been throughout his career as well. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss the message and the mindset needed for the Florida Panthers throughout the rest of training camp and into the seasons, and something that Paul Maurice has definitely emphasized through the first few days. We're going to discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
third and final segment here on this Friday, September 22nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And Paul Maurice made a big point. I think I should have counted how many times he said the word reinvest. But it was more than once, and that's really what caught my eye on really the focus of Paul Maurice. And if you guys want, and if you guys, the listeners, want to have an opportunity to listen what Paul Maurice had to say, subscribe to the YouTube channel, where we'll be bringing you media availabilities from training camp all throughout the preseason as well and into the regular season. So you'll get an opportunity to listen of all the media availabilities, just like I do. You guys will have that opportunity. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. But reinvest, Nick, is the key. And I'm not sure how many times he would be using that vocabulary based on if they ended up not making the playoffs at all. Because if you're talking about reinvesting, what are you reinvesting in? If you really think about it from that standpoint. But think about how with the Panthers, and talking about how this was a team that didn't blow people out of the water throughout the postseason. Paul Maurice made it an emphasis of scratching and clawing, having their playoffs starting basically in January as well. And for the Panthers, winning all these low-scoring games, grinding it out, tight forechecking, and really the game slowing down as well, which the Florida Panthers were able to do. And let's not also forget great goaltending. That also has a big part of it. But what's in between all the great, outside of the great goaltending, of using your stick, closing out lanes as well for that. And that's really going back to another word that was said a lot during media day, the standard for this team as well. And that's really something that really just caught my eye, as the Panthers are just continuing to build their culture. And it's not just, and we're at a point when where we are talking about it a lot, but we have a good reason to talk about it based on the results and based on the hard work that we're seeing just in these first 2 days of training camp.
Well, with the amount of times that he probably said reinvest, I felt like I was back in an economics class back in high school. Always reinvest, reinvest, reinvest off your gains. So, let that be a lesson to everybody who listens right now. So, it's a very good term to use right now, because everybody bought in, and look at the results that they got. Did they win the ultimate prize? No, but did they gain a ton? Yeah. So what you're going to do is you're going to take what you gained, what you learned, and you're going to reinvest that into something new this season. But you're going to keep kind of the same formula as far as scratching, clawing, doing all the little things right, playing the right way when you have a lead late in the game, having good goaltending, and making the right decisions. So I think some of those things, they are controllable. But at the same time, the game and the puck will dictate how that happens and when that happens. So it's just, you have to trust the process. And hopefully Florida will be able to basically reinvest or buy back in, much earlier this season, rather than waiting later in the year and making some noise.
Yeah, and Mo spoke about how every team is going to go through a 3 or 4 game slump. How are you going to weather some of those storms when it comes to those some of those losing streaks as well? And every season has their own individual stories. And you think about different adversity when it comes to injuries, different adversity when it comes to unlucky bounces as well. Even that's a factor in to the season as well. And it's not necessarily saying, oh, just because they've done it in the past means they'll do it again. It's all about, because we know what it takes, we know the proper steps on how to win, what is needed in order to put the opposition in a bad position to create a turnover or to draw a penalty to get yourself on the man advantage as well. And also, not only that, what to say on the bench in between line changes as well, between Mo, assistant coaches, power play unit, PK unit, everyone. What is said differently as well throughout all of that, the messaging through up and down through, and I think that is going to, and the fact that they went through all of that is going to help some of that, as far as especially the trust factor. That's a big point that I want to put out there, as far as there is trust in with this coaching staff.
There definitely is, and I think they proved a point coming back 3-1 from Boston, a juggernaut of a team having the best regular season, team not losing their composure, or at least, putting up a fight to make sure that they survive. And then you walk into, Toronto, who wanted Florida in the first place, and Florida kind of showed them what happens, when, you get what you want. You may not want to wish that too much. And then you have Carolina, who unfortunately can't seem to win a game in the Eastern Conference Finals, but is always a Stanley Cup contender. You just got to let the noise go away. You just got to buy back in, listen to who, is next to you on the bench, listen to your coaches, and just really realize that the overall goal is to play hard, play the right way, and hopefully get a W out of it.
Yeah, and definitely we will definitely see that messaging more and more, especially with the experience factor there. There's going to be a new journey. There's going to be new hard decisions for Bill Zito and Paul Maurice when the cuts do happen, when they eventually make their original 23-man roster. But that's still a ways away from now. They still have 2 more practices, Saturday and Sunday, and then their doubleheader on Monday against the Nashville Predators. So, Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Armando, as always, thank you again for having me on, and having me on for Fairbanks Friday once again. And fans, if you guys would like to follow me and hear more of my opinions, you guys can follow me on the X at Prudentia0. But Armando, thank you again for having me on.
Thank you so much, Nick, and see you next week, my friend.
See you next week.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nick Fairbanks, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.